When No Man's Sky first came out, everyone flooded it with sales within the first 24 hours. And then, of course, the first review came out, and the second review, and the third review. And after 24 hours, people also slowly started to realize themselves that this was nothing like the game they had been shown for the last year, or the game that had been talked about for the last year, or even remotely close to anything Sean Murray had even mentioned in the last year. So what the fuck happened? Well, we never got an answer to that, what the fuck happened, and we probably never will get an answer to what the fuck happened with No Man's Sky. But if I was a betting man, I would say that Sean Murray started running his mouth about these experimental builds he had been playing, and the development team couldn't find a way to make most of those things stable and consistent and run on a lot of platforms, including consoles. There's something like a 13 or 14 man developer team. EA has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees, and some of their games still come out like shit on PCs and consoles. So for a 13-man team to be able to do this, they probably saw that a lot of these features they'd had in experimental builds weren't going to work, had to be reined in, or had to be ditched completely in order to make it an actual functioning game on PCs and PlayStation 4. We've seen this happen time and time again with developers. Peter Molyneux is a famous case, and I feel like maybe Sean Murray is a reincarnation of Peter Molyneux to some distinct event. He's our generation's Peter Molyneux in this generation of gaming. But No Man's Sky has been out for a year now, and their latest update, Atlas Rising, has been their new full year update. As a matter of fact, they've had 3 updates in the last year, one every 4 months, and each update has delivered a pretty sizable amount of content to No Man's Sky. But if you're somebody that hasn't played No Man's Sky, like me, in over 9, 10, 11 months, I mean basically a week after it came out, then there is now a massive amount of new things to do, new things to see, and new things to try. But first, let's highlight the important points of reasons why it still may not be worth your time even with these updates, and then we'll talk about the reasons why I think you should return, as it has managed to even hold my attention. And as we all know, I'm a fickle son of a bitch when it comes to video games. So, first off, planets are still the same. They're basically slightly different shapes and slightly different shades of slightly different textured terrain. There's not any kind of massive variance between these planets, unfortunately. Some of the best things you can do are find cool systems, and some of the new filters, such as Vintage or Vibrant, add a nice, subtle, dulcet tone to the color of the worlds, or really make some colors pop out with way too much bloom. Personally, some people like a lot of bloom, not me. So that can change the visual aesthetics and the visual look of the game for you, if that's what you're looking for, but they did say they added more world variety. I kinda notice it if I look really hard and I really try, but that's nothing fancy. I'm still not seeing, you know, craziness. It seems so hard to find these beautiful, magnificent looking worlds that have these insane features. Like, I know one guy on Reddit found a planet that had big spiral geography, and then it had these huge plateaus that came out of each of the spiral geography, and that's how the entire planet was made. I've yet to discover anything like that, and as far as I know, that was a one-off thing that somebody found in No Man's Sky. It's so difficult to find really interesting things like that. If the game was constantly really interesting things like that, then it would definitely keep you more entertained about exploring. As it stands, it still does not do that, and finding those things seem so few and far between. You're going to have to jump hundreds of times before you find one of them, and then another 100 to find one more. So eye candy this game is still not, even after those updates. What also bothers me is their particular method of dealing with pop-in. Now, let me be frank, this is actually a good method of dealing with pop-in if they could do it more smoothly. The terrain, and this is to the default, is also a defect of the game in my opinion, of how they designed it. The terrain is made to blend in with each other, so as you get closer and things become high resolution and they pop in, they have a weird sort of tessellation artifacting that goes over top of everything, which you can absolutely see. But what this leads to is that you do not notice the pop-in of objects as you get closer, as it blends in with this tessellation that occurs. That's a great way of dealing with it if you could do it smoothly so that the user does not notice. Unfortunately, this is a technology that definitely seems in its infancy here in No Man's Sky, and you can absolutely tell the shift. So visual candy this game is not, and is still not. What also still is not different is a large portion of this game will rely on gathering a large amount of resources sometimes, especially when it comes to base building. Now, I'll admit base building can be fun, but what I don't like about base building is that there are certain things you cannot do until you complete certain quests along the way. I've been trying to build a giant cubic room inside my base, but I don't actually have the necessary tools or abilities yet to do that, to actually attach a cubic building onto standard buildings, and I won't until I complete so far along down the quest. Speaking of completing quests, many quests are bugged too easily. However, it's not repeatable. Azid and myself have experienced a number of bugs regarding quest bugging, where the quest giver will no longer respond. You have to delete the station at where the quest giver spawns, then replace the station at which the quest giver is at, repeat the quest, and then most of the time it still doesn't actually work, but that's a hope, and it has worked once or twice for Azid anyway. My current issue is that my overseer, which oversees the construction of your base, is supposedly somewhere in the middle of space currently, or at least that's what the game telling me. I can actually see him in my base, but the game tells me I have to go into the middle of the system, in the middle of nowhere, in order to actually talk to my overseer to be able to complete this quest. Regardless of what I do, it's still bugged in this manner, which means I am literally dead halted in No Man's Sky, and because they are a small development team, this bug being fixed is extremely unlikely. Joy. Now, most people say the game actually flows much smoother with a new save if you start the game fresh, but I'll be honest with you, my current save has over 40 hours of time spent in No Man's Sky, 20 of which occurred within the first week before I had just had enough with this game and the lies of Sean Murray and lost my shit. The other 20 have actually occurred within this week with this renewed interest in No Man's Sky that I currently have. Regressing 40 hours in No Man's Sky to a new game, losing several million credits, a base, progression through Atlas and getting Atlas passes, and my multi-tool, ship size, and inventory space is not something I want to do, nor would I look forward to doing, and while that may actually be the only solution to fix my current overseer problem, it's a shitty one. And this is something that I wish No Man's Sky at Hello Games themselves would spend a lot more of that $300 million they have on actual research and development or bug fixing or Q&A testing for these things before they send them out there. And yeah, I said $300 million. That's probably on the short side. It's being a little lenient to them. It's assuming they sold 10 million copies. We know for a fact they sold over 5 million on PC, and we know that there are more console owners than there are PC owners, high-end PC owners that could play something like No Man's Sky from Steam. So the likelihood is they at least also sold 5 million on console as well. When you factor all that in, it's going to be, on the low end, $300 million that a studio of 13 people earned. Yes, I'm factoring in the 30% you lose from Steam, 30 to 40% depending on the developer. Yes, I'm factoring in Sony's take of 30 to 40% when you sell on their marketplace. And yes, I'm factoring in retail and full digital as well. $300 million. 13 people. One studio. Get off your fucking ass and spend some goddamn money. But I digress about that. In all fairness, they're not making any more money on No Man's Sky whatsoever. New people certainly aren't buying the game. And the studio, Hello Games themselves, once No Man's Sky is done, is probably going to have to dissolve. And if Sean Murray ever wants to create another video game again, his name will have to be very much not attached to the studio or the game he's working on. He'll essentially have to do it in silent, because him being attached to a game would be nothing but absolute negative press and distrust for a game, essentially condemning it to poor sale figures for the indefinite week. And then, if the game is good, it might pick up traction. If the game is average, it'll be forgotten about and no one will touch it. And if the game is bad, that's just reaffirming our belief that you shouldn't trust Sean Murray or anything he touches. So, lots of bugs, the scenery hasn't really changed, and the core gameplay loop is essentially still the same, but there have been changes. And some of those changes include adding another type of gameplay loop. There's apparently over 30 hours of questline story DLC here from Atlas Rising, of which I've done about the first 10 missions. None of them have yet to bug out on me. I'm assuming one will eventually, though. But it is an actual quest with an actual story, with actual characters and actual people in a massive universe that is actually interesting. I know, it's amazing. It's like they learned how to write in like the last year or something. I don't get it. All this culminates to a story I actually want to keep going with and learn more about because it's genuinely interesting. And if it is 30 hours long like they said it is, I might be able to get behind saying, yeah, No Man's Sky is worth a $30 or a 30-hour story for $60, depending on how good the actual story is. Now, that being said, I haven't finished it. It could have plot holes the size of a semi-truck, and it could also just be garbage writing halfway through. We've seen stories take complete nosedives for no apparent reasons. And with a studio like Hello Games, it's really hard to actually anticipate what to expect from them because their level of content delivery in terms of quality is such a mismatch from when the game delivered to what we're getting now. When the game delivered, the game was complete and utter shit compared to what they had set our expectations at, and that is Sean Murray and Hello Games' fault for setting our expectations well beyond what the game actually was. But the content that they've been delivering in DLCs has been fairly substantial. Not only substantial, but free. Mostly because if it wasn't free, the internet would lose their shit and scream and shout like children at Sean Murray for being an asshole money-grubbing bastard. Which, yes, I would agree he is a studio of 13 people and $300 million. So far, this storied content has been very good. We're actually learning things about the universe that we're in, and it makes it extremely interesting. We're learning the origins of yourself as a character, the Travelers. We're learning the origins of the Sentinels, why they are here, where they come from, and how they get around so quickly, and where this takes you. And it takes you to some very dark places in the galaxy, which I find very interesting. And quite frankly, they found an ingenious way to frame their quest work around the universe they're in. The thing is, because the planets are randomly generated, if you get a quest and what's in the system has not generated what you need for the quest can tell you, go to a new system, and it will make sure it auto-populates or auto-generates that thing needed for the quest in that system. Supposedly. This does not always work the first or second or seventh time. Sometimes it takes 10 times, but it works eventually. What this does mean is quest objectives are fairly close by, 5 to 10 minutes worth of travel time at the most, and minimal downtime between quests in terms of things you can or cannot actually do. It's fairly nice. Along with the questing, combined with the farming, combined with the base building, combined with the factions, the economy, and the new selling system when it comes to farming and actually generating money from that way, it's actually fairly interesting. Not to mention land vehicles, new types of weapons, new types of shielding tech that go in both your exosuit, your ship, and your multi-tool, new types of multi-tools and new types of ship, S-class specific ships that are for the rich and glamorous, which cost stupidly absorbent amounts of money. But they offer things like better shielding, better damage numbers, better scanning, things like that, and they also look real nice and pretty. So there is actually more to do in No Man's Sky, more than there's ever been before. And if you've taken a break from No Man's Sky, or disowned the game and Sean Murray and Hello Games completely, if it's still in your Steam library, you might actually consider reinstalling it. I'm not condoning, any of this, I'm just saying, give it a second chance. Take a look at it again. Play through the story, and then decide. Because this has all been free, so as far as I'm concerned, all this DLC was part of that $60 package deal that we paid with Hello Games up front in the first place. And so far, if they continue to deliver content like this, because they have money to run for decades, apparently, I'm not so sure that it was a bad buy in the first place, the farther this goes on. So, No Man's Sky, worth a revisit? I think so. I don't know that it's worth your $60 if you haven't bought it yet already, but the story's become fairly intriguing so far, and there are a multitude of new systems to play around with. There are still lots of bugs and issues, which we get radio silence on from Sean Murray. They either talk and say a lot, or they say absolutely nothing at all for months and months at a time, including bug fixes, so I don't know how their consistency is on that. We'll see where it goes from there. If the worry of bugs is something that deters you from it, then I would absolutely stay away from it currently, or possibly purchasing it or reinvesting in it, or spending time with it again, just for the pure frustration that can come from a lot of these things, such as your overseer being stuck in a loop and you no longer being able to complete quests, period. I'm Guns. That's my ideas on the new No Man's Sky Atlas Rising update and the whole new year worth of content that they have given us here. I think it's interesting. I think it's worth a revisit if it's sitting in your Steam library, but I wouldn't pull that trigger just yet if you're thinking about buying No Man's Sky. It's obviously not an easy sell. I'll see you guys later. Come watch all the action live over at twitch.tv/gunsgames. You can support me directly on a monthly basis over at patreon.com